Welcome to the Cure Chronicles. I'm ecstatic to be joined by Guy Anthony today, a dedicated HIV/AIDS activist, community leader, and author. Diagnosed with HIV as a teen, Guy has dedicated his adult life to the pursuit of neutralizing local and global HIV and AIDS-related stigma. He released a book called Positively Beautiful and was named one of the top 100 HIV Prevention Leaders Under 30 by POZ Magazine, one of the top 100 Black LGBTQ SGL Emerging Leaders to Watch by National Black Justice Coalition, and one of DBQ Magazine's Loud 100, which happens to be the only LGBTQ list of 100 influential people of color. He's also founder of the Black Gifted and Whole Foundation, an organization that provides scholarship to Black gay men attending college. Very impressive. Welcome, Guy, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor. I'm excited about this. Anytime I get to share what I've gone through with anyone, I take it very seriously. I do not play around with my story because I understand that my story has gotten me to this point, and it has positively impacted other people's lives. I don't know how, because it's just my truth, but apparently my truth resonates with people. So,
Sure.
I won't fight it. But a little bit about why I say that is because growing up in a very religious household, my parents, my mom's almost an evangelist, if you will. We all grew up in church. Sex was not even talked about. So before we can even think about HIV being stigmatized, hell, sex was stigmatized in my household. And then after I was outed, I didn't have the luxury of coming out on my own. I was outed by a family member at the age of 16. Before I even understood what my sexuality would be, I knew that there were some things that happened to me in my childhood that would ultimately change the trajectory of my life. And so I knew that I was, struggling with these feelings. But whenever I would try to talk about it, it was go pray about it, or let's go to the altar. And so before I even was infected with HIV, my sex was stigmatized. And so, and I'm not alone in that. A lot of Black and Brown communities, we are very religious, and the stigmatization of even having sex, God forbid I have same-sex sex, so that was something that we talked about. My parents never talked to me about sex. Everything that I learned about sex, I learned from other people in the world. And so, I often say that, most people are afraid of the stigma because I know a lot of people that are in care but won't talk about it.
Huh.
And so essentially, I may be jumping around a bit. That was really one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book Positively Beautiful, is because I had so many friends living with HIV, but they were sort of all coming to me and dumping on me and asking for the resources. And how do I talk to my doctor? How should I empower myself to communicate with my doctor about my own sex life? And so that's why I wrote the book. Like, okay, listen, I have so many friends living with HIV, but everyone's afraid to talk about it. And so I think that, storytelling has definitely helped my career in the sense that I'm not afraid to share, how I became HIV positive, my life before and post diagnosis. And especially in the South, where they don't have as many resources as I have living in Brooklyn. My healthcare looks completely different than another Black gay man's health. And the way in which he engages his doctors in the South. And so I just wanted to, not make an umbrella statement, but just let everyone know that, you could be in the South, you could be on the West Coast or the East Coast, and we're all living with this disease. And you may not be as vocal as I am about it, but you can talk about it. And here's the language to help you talk about it.
Yeah. So this is your way of breaking through the stigma, is to be really open and genuine about your situation. And it sounds like people can go ahead and identify with you, but it also does seem like you've made some tremendous step forward in your own life, because one of the things that I saw in your book was a couple of concepts that I really that stuck out at me, that I was looking forward to talking to you about. One was the difference between living with HIV rather than being HIV positive. And then the second thing, which I thought was related, was finding happiness. Like at the end of one of the chapters, you go, I am happy. Okay. And, happiness is a very complex concept, right? but there is a possibility of finding happiness in a wide variety of situations. There isn't just one way to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, can you, kind of share some of your
Yeah.
wisdom in this area? Because I think that a lot of people are trying to look for that, opportunity to still be happy, even facing challenges as just huge as,
Yeah.
as
And
living with HIV.
and even with that, because I feel like when you say um, I am HIV positive, you put yourself in a box.
Hmm.
And when I say that I have HIV, I'm also dark skinned. I also am an actor. I'm also all these other things
Hmm.
besides my HIV status. And I
Hmm.
think that sometimes people get so caught up in that status because to them it is the end all to their life. And
Hmm.
what I understood the most is that I truly began to live after my diagnosis, which
Hmm.
is which is quite interesting because
Yeah.
before, I mean, a little bit more about my background, I don't mind. I was, a drug addict living in LA when I was diagnosed. I had
Hmm.
been sexually assaulted when I was living in Philadelphia. That is how I seroconverted. So, it wasn't as if I was promiscuous and having lots of sex. I was actually sexually assaulted. And
Yeah.
so when you think about the stigma, it's not the HIV, it's around the sex part. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so what if I was sexually assaulted? Do you still feel that way about HIV now? Because
Hmm.
this wasn't something that I can control. And even if you could control it and you had sex and serial converted in that way, so what? There shouldn't be any stigma around it anyway. Oh
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think it's more, what do you, it's not so much how you think about HIV, but how you think about the person who
Yes.
happens to have HIV, and what does
Yes.
that mean? That is the stigma, right? Because there is this presumption, right?
Yeah.
That immediate presumption that, oh, well, if they have HIV, they must be gay.
Yeah.
Well, that is absolutely false. Okay, I talk to lots of
Well,
people
that's
that
the
are
way
straight that have HIV.
essentially that's the way the media has portrayed it, right? Because even when I was younger, I didn't know what HIV was per se, but I just knew it was a gay disease.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
so
that's what
I'm
I
like,
guess it's almost like they only talk about it together,
they
right?
only talk about it in that regard.
It,
And then it's, and even if, growing up in Detroit, as a gay man, I as I got older, I was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna get HIV. Because that was almost expected of me being gay, especially I remember, growing up, like I said, in church, and our pastor would preach about homosexuality, and the result of being gay would be HIV. So
hmm.
you
Oh,
already put the
wow.
fear of God in me,
Yeah.
that I would contract HIV without me even understanding my sexuality at that time. And so, like, what I try to do is I'm a rapper, I'm an artist, I write, I'm an advocate, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm all those things wrapped up in one. HIV is just part of my story. And I
Right.
make it a point to, let people know that everything that you wanted to do before your diagnosis, you can still do. And so to
Yeah.
go back about the way that I started to live after diagnosis, I was going down a very dark path. And I did not see myself making it to 25 years old. I really did not, because I was dealing with so much depression. I didn't know at that time, but it was depression. I have bipolar disorder and I take medication for it. So that's also something else, right? And so I knew that I had been depressed because of the molestation as a child and then the rape at 19. I just knew, and I self-medicated with the drugs, and I just did not see myself living. And then one day, I go get tested and it came back positive. I remember the tester was just like, you have no emotion. Like, there was no tears. I knew it because I felt like I had been told my whole life because I was a gay man that I would get HIV. So to me, it was just like, okay, just another thing. And so, for a while, I had a near death experience while living in LA, and I had to go back home. And that's the moment I was like, I'm not going to allow HIV to take me out. I'm not going to allow anything to take me out, period. And so that's when I got into care because I met a man in Atlanta and I was underinsured, just underweight, all these types of things. And I remember Googling and researching HIV AIDS organizations, in my area. And I found this center, this drop-in center. And it was the first time that I had seen other Black gay men talk about HIV in such a way that it wasn't a death sentence. And I was like, okay, so there are people actually living whole lives with HIV. And I remember my mentor at the time, I was struggling with, coming out, disclosing my own status. And he told me, he says, Guy, if we don't tell our own stories, then our stories die with us, or people are left to determine the story about us. And
Mm.
at that moment, it clicked. I got to tell my story.
Yeah.
And that's how Positively Beautiful, was born, because I decided that I don't want anybody telling my story but me.
Right.
And it is not this is not the end of my story, me being, HIV positive. In so many ways, my career took off after, sitting in that truth. But I do understand that everybody's, trajectory in life is not to disclose their status or be as public as I am. But
Mhm.
that's my way of, getting myself out of depression, getting myself out of the mind frame that I was going to die from this disease. Like, no, I am going to live, and I'm going to help other people live too.
I mean, that's just absolutely fascinating. It seems like facing your greatest fear, sort of
Yes.
realizing your greatest fear, made you kind of relook at your entire life and decide to start living it, right?
Yes.
You were, it seems like you kind of, that was a moment, a turning point where you decided you're going to take charge of your life. And then it looks
Yeah.
like you got a little bit of luck there, like you ran into somebody that was a good mentor, right?
Yes.
Which is
And
critically important, right? And that's
it,
another
it,
thing that you're doing here with all of your openness, with all of telling your truth. You're spreading a lot of the things that you learned from that part of your journey, and this could be something that could, give somebody a new perspective, and they could grab onto their life and be more than just HIV positive. They could be living with HIV, and that could just be part of their life, and the rest of their life could be happy and fulfilling, and
yeah,
and they could be directing their own life.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
agree.
what a fantastic, way to look at it. So how do you, so can you share with me a little bit of, what is the day-to-day experience living with HIV? So what are the extra things that have to be incorporated in your life, or the things that come along with HIV that you just have to deal with, that are the things that you have to kind of set aside, and then, add in everything else that is fulfilling in your life?
Well, I have two. I guess I have two. Two starting points. One, um, being newly diagnosed was different from my day to
Hmm.
day, but now I'm 17 years positive.
Hmm.
So the only time I remember that I have HIV is when I take my meds at night,
Got it. Okay,
right?
so
And so
once
because
a day you get reminded, and is that
once
just
a
like
day,
one pill, or?
one pill a day, and that is mind-boggling to me, because,
Yeah,
and I owe it to my ancestors who had to take upwards to 30 pills a day in
yeah.
1986, the year I was born, right? And
Hmm.
all I have to take is one. How
Oh,
dare
and
I
even the people that were taking 36 pills, most of them died
it,
from
and that's
HIV.
what I'm
And
saying.
now you take one, and your
That's the
expectation
point.
is a normal lifespan. I mean,
And
it's
now, with Cabenuva, bi-monthly, I can take an injectable. So
uh-huh.
6 times a year, I take my medication. I can, get injections, right? And so,
Okay.
that just it's mind blowing that my ancestors had to, do so much and fight for us. So the ACT UP people, even
Yeah.
some people in my life, Marlon Riggs, Essex Hempsfield, who are my ancestors, who died before, recognizing that they could live because they didn't have the opportunity to. And
Yeah.
so, if I just have to take one pill a day, it's worth it, because they put in so much work for me to get that one pill. And so,
Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
say, when I was newly diagnosed, it was such a burden, because, I did not have my own place. So I was living with people. I was underinsured. And so the stigma there was, okay, now I have to take this medication. Where do I even store my medication? Right. So
Hmm.
that's what, like, when you're living with someone and you haven't disclosed your status, you're kind of at the mercy of other people being in the room or being at home. So you have to sneak off and take medication, or you just bypass taking medication altogether. Yes, these are real things that are happening with
Wow.
people. And that's why I always say, what we're lacking at across the board are the wraparound services that people living with HIV deserve. Right. So now I'm newly diagnosed. I have ADAP. You connected me to the resource. But now, okay, I live with my mom. I don't want her to know I have HIV. You know, where do I store my medication? What about my food insecurities? Do I have enough food to take my medications with? There are so many things that a lot of people are dealing with that I don't have to deal with because like you said, I got a little lucky. I moved to a place like DC where pretty much everyone is insured, right? And then I
Mm,
moved to a place like New York where the moment you test positive in New York, you are guaranteed a housing voucher, and you get a Metro Pass, and you get food stamps.
right.
So those wraparound services, but I have to be cognizant that someone in Mississippi, a Black gay man, or anyone living with HIV in Mississippi, they are not going to get a housing voucher. They're not going to get access, available access to the doctors to and fro. Like, how am I supposed to get to my visits? So these are so many things that a lot of people like me are really dealing with. And it takes people like me that only thinks about it one time a day to advocate for them.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think it is neat that you call back to those activists of the
Yes.
'80s, because if
Oh,
they hadn't gotten the attention that they received by
yeah.
forcing themselves on politicians and leaders and things like that,
They fought for us.
they
From
would,
young.
they could have taken twice as long to develop what we have
Absolutely.
today, right?
And so
Yeah.
my offering is to advocate for, I work in corporate America, I work with pharmaceutical companies, and oftentimes I'm the only Black man at the table. And then I'm the only Black man with HIV at the table. So there are so many people making decisions about my life without my input.
And the lives of people like you, right? But one of the things that you said in your book is that 3% of gay Black men become infected. I mean, well, if that's the case, right? If you look at the general population of the United States and the rate of HIV infection, that is huge. That's
And
huge.
it's all
That's
us in
even,
the It's all
yeah,
us in
yeah.
the
So, like, how could you not be represented in,
Yeah,
sort of all of the thinking? That's a market by itself,
yeah.
right?
And that's
That,
why I wrote the
yeah,
book. I
yeah.
wrote the book for that reason alone, is I wanted people to see themselves. And I did not want to focus on morbidity of living with HIV. I wanted to focus on the vitality of life
Hmm.
once you become diagnosed. So if you notice, I took time and made the typography in the book beautiful. The cover's beautiful. It's hidden gems. They're little pills. There's a heart in there. There's a man pushing to the earth, trying to get out of his situation and see the light.
Yeah.
I made sure that I styled the guides right. I took great pictures. I wanted people
Yeah.
to see themselves in this book and not go, okay, this is somebody else just preaching to us to get us to take medication. No, that's just half of the battle, right? Like, I need you to see yourself represented in this little book because it's only a couple pages, right? But that book has gotten me to interview with you today. So it's
Uh,
not just a little book, right? It's
yeah,
something
well,
that,
no, I mean, you've done so much more than just the book, too. I mean,
well, that was the like that started it off. Like, people,
really?
I would have not
Wow.
gotten a job as a
That was your
treatment
little
administrator.
work. That was your work of art that actually
That was
sort
my
of
work of art.
brought people to the table. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, and it
yeah.
is a work of art. I mean, I think
Thank
what
you.
you're talking about in terms of the thought that went into the cover graphic, and
Yes.
you know, the way that you presented the folks in that book. Of course, they are in. I'm not gay myself, but I recognize that those guys are incredibly attractive guys living with HIV, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you made them look beautiful. You made them look like they were living a life through those
Yeah.
pictures. And then
Thank
you
you.
let them tell their own story
Yes.
and write I love that thing where they write letters to their old selves, right?
Yes.
And you see that they made a transition,
Yes.
from young to old. And that advice actually is probably good for that person in Mississippi who's,
Yes.
12 years old or 15 years old and realizes that they're different
Yeah.
and feels like they're really alone. And they
Yeah.
read that book and they realize, okay, this is a journey that is actually, it's been traveled by many people
Yes.
before, and that might give them the strength or the motivation to maybe find some of those support groups,
Yes.
yeah, and take charge of their life even earlier than you got to. I mean, here you are,
Yeah.
this incredible success story. And the only thing that would have made it better is if it had happened at 17, right, where you were able to
Yes.
take charge of your life, and maybe without HIV, right?
Yes.
I mean, now HIV was a trigger
Yeah.
for you, and it's really great that you can put it in that positive light. But you know,
Yeah.
being gay in America is still not simple, is it?
Yeah.
You know,
No.
it's
And
they need
people,
heroes, they need role models, they need to know that they're not alone. And
yeah,
then, you add HIV on top of that, and it's like, another reason to be in the closet, another
I know.
thing that you can't admit to people around you. I was
Yeah,
just blown away with, that you've admitted it to everybody. I mean, that's so
yeah,
brave, but also I think, you move to a location where you can live a normal life, because of course in the New York area, right, well, this is just a thing,
no
right?
one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. It's like DC, right?
Yes,
But even in those places, right, it's cool that New York has got this attitude that, well, look, if you've got HIV, then we need to make sure that you can get to your doctor's appointment so that
yes,
you're not a potential spreader of HIV, that you're getting good medication. Because maybe everybody doesn't know this, but
yeah,
you taking your pill every day, you are what is called well controlled,
yeah,
suppressed. You are uninfectious.
yes,
That's like, you're no different than somebody who doesn't have HIV in terms of the level of threat to people around you. You have
yes,
nothing that is contagious.
yeah,
So, that is something that New York says, hey, that's worth an investment in. Let's give him a housing voucher. Let's give him a metro pass. Let's make sure he makes it to his doctor's appointment, gets his medication. Now, you were motivated to do that on your own. There's a lot of
absolutely.
people that are living with that despair, that
Yeah,
depression, right? And I've talked to some of them too. I've talked to people that were suicidal. It just
yes,
blew my mind, right?
yeah,
They felt like they had nothing to look forward to. Once again, something critical about your story that
yeah.
everybody needs to hear is that
Thank
there
you.
is a reason to go on. There
Yes,
is a life after,
yeah.
HIV. And
And,
and hopefully it'll just get better and better, right?
I don't want people to assume that, okay, because I'm so open, so transparent, that I don't have my down days, that I don't get
Hmm.
dark.
Yeah.
I remember one time I met someone, I liked them, and we went on a date. And for the first time in a very long time, I was a little nervous about disclosing. And I'm
Hmm.
like, well, because this person didn't know me, he didn't know my story, he didn't know I wrote a book. We were just meeting as two people
Right.
connecting. And then after I disclosed, his face changed, and he
Yeah.
made the statement that, oh, I was dirty. He was like,
Oh my
I only
gosh.
date clean people. Now I
Huh.
take 3 showers a day. I'm the cleanest person you know. I mean, let's be
Yeah.
clear. But at that moment, as far as I am along in my activism, in my advocacy, in my tell the world that I'm positive, that hurt me. That broke my
Oh,
heart a little bit.
how could
You
it
know,
not hurt you? Yeah.
so
I
I
mean, don't we
often
all want to be liked, right? Don't we
all
all
want to
want to
be
be
like,
accepted? Don't we all want to be loved for what we are,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
And we try our best. And
yeah,
then, somebody tosses something like that at us that
yeah,
really it's just a prejudice.
yeah,
it's kind of ignorance in a way,
yes.
right? I mean, to associate it with not being clean, I mean, that's just totally the wrong word.
But you'd be
And
surprised. People still use
yeah,
that language. I can do it. If you do a quick search, I did this before this call, of HIV on Twitter under trending, you'll see so many disparaging things about
yeah.
people living with, so many jokes about us. Or go on
Hmm.
Instagram and you search HIV and you look and see what people are saying about us. As much as we want to believe people have evolved and they don't think, they don't stigmatize people living with HIV, they still do. And right now, it's even more present because we get to see it on social media. And so,
Yeah.
luckily, that doesn't bother me anymore. But imagine someone newly diagnosed without the resources, without the courage that I have. This could deter them from even getting into care because they don't want people to know. And
Yeah.
so, that is why it's important that I consistently stay in front of the media and show them, like, you can live a full life, and talk about my drug abuse, talk about the molestation, talk about the rape, because a lot of people are going through that too, but they don't have the language. And so I'm
Hmm.
hoping that I'm giving them some sort of language to articulate their feelings and get the help that they need. But it's really difficult with this generation because we all live on our phones. And imagine seeing HIV dirty, clean, unclean on social media. Like, that is
Hmm.
it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we're seeing that in so many different areas of young people's lives, and how social media and everybody's
yeah,
addiction to it, and the fact that people can now anonymously snipe at others,
yeah,
through social media with anonymity, and
yeah,
they and that this is a natural thing. Like when you go to the playground, the little kids, they feel better about themselves if they can put other people down. And I don't think that adults outgrow that in all
No,
cases, right?
you don't.
Sometimes, the reason that they lash out at a vulnerable community, or, or they go ahead and embrace these prejudices, is just because of their own fears,
Yeah,
their own insecurities,
I agree.
their own kind of lack of self-esteem. And so, they go, well, if everybody around me is, down a notch, that
Yeah,
makes them feel better. That's really interesting. And so another part of what I'm hearing in your message is like, hey,
yeah,
don't be Anthony. Take Guy
yes,
Anthony's, sort of vocabulary, his language, his knowledge, his experience, and utilize it in your life
yeah,
to grab your life and do what's right for you, right? Because you've
yeah,
even said a number of times here, hey, I'm not saying everybody should be out loud about this, and just reveal their status all over the
yeah,
place. Now you did that and that worked for you, but what you're saying is that they should have the knowledge through which they can select a path forward that will give
absolutely.
them the greatest opportunity for what? And what's the big theme in the book? Happiness, right?
Happiness, affirmations. And I'm an artist, so the book was a form of an extension of my art. I released a rap album where I talk about drug addiction, and I talk about being raped and HIV. That's another part of my art. Me advocating on Capitol Hill for expansion in Medicaid for ADAP, that's another part of my art. And I often say, art saved my life in ways that a doctor couldn't, because I was just another number sometimes to these
Hmm.
people, right? I get 15 minutes with the doctor, cool, you take your meds, cool. But no one is really, looking at the whole person. I'm just sort of a line item on a grant. And I don't like that. And so I was empowered enough to create art that resonates with people. And I think
Hmm.
that that is something that kind of differentiates me from other activists or advocates, is because
Hmm.
I'm putting all of my true feelings in my art, and people love art that resonates with everyone. So
Yeah.
and I wrote a script recently about, it's called POZ NYC, about dating with HIV in New York. That's another form of my art. So I'm
Yeah.
showing people in different ways that you don't necessarily just have to get on a microphone, do a pharmaceutical campaign. You can create art, and let that be an extension of your activism, and you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to say it, straight ahead. So
Yeah, I think that, experience can cause deep feelings, and having deep
absolutely.
feelings, sort of begs for an outlet, right? And then
Yes.
some people are lucky enough to find their art. Because I think that, art is all about not just telling something in a factual way, but telling something in an emotional way as well, right? And I think that's why that has so much appeal to people, because you're
Yeah.
touching not just their minds with logic, but their
Yeah.
hearts with emotion. And when you tell your truth with authenticity,
Yeah.
one of the things that I find is it cuts right through to the heart,
Absolutely.
right? And it gives the head a reason to listen.
Yes.
And so it's a second type of art that you're doing, Guy, which is
Yeah.
evangelism, right? You called, yeah, like evangelism has kind of a dirty word down in the
Yeah.
South because it's probably all anti-gay and has all
Yes.
this stigma and stuff like that. But evangelism to me is about just telling your truth from the heart,
Mm.
right? And on this interview and in everything that I've seen you do, and and in the book especially, I really thought that came through. And
Thank
so
you.
there's two forms of art there that I think are really valuable, and an opportunity for people to connect with you
Yeah.
and really benefit from all the things that you had the courage and the
Yeah.
strength to figure out and to deploy in your life and to
Yeah.
get to such a great place. And
I
I
love
got
it.
to say, I felt like I knew you before I even met you, because I've seen you
Oh,
so much on TV, and, and then having read your book and seen some of your other interviews, especially the HHS one. I thought that was a really, very
thank you.
tight, few minutes that everybody should watch it. And I want to also say that everybody in the world should read your book.
Thank you.
It shouldn't be confined to people that have HIV or people that are gay. No, it
Yeah.
should be for everybody to go ahead and exercise the most important human emotion and attribute that we have, and that is empathy with other
Yes.
people. This is
Absolutely.
your chance if you are like a straight white,
Yeah.
guy, right? To go ahead and walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And
Yes.
and and one of the things that it might give them is a little bit
Mm.
more strength to handle the challenges in their life. Because
Absolutely.
everybody looks at their worst problem and it's their worst problem, right? You
Yeah.
get a little bit of perspective and you go, your worst problem ain't all that bad, buddy, right?
Yes.
Buck
Yep.
up, yeah, and
Yeah.
find your happiness and find connection to other people and figure out a way to love people that are not like yourself, right? And that
Absolutely.
book just invites you to do it. So highly recommended for everybody out there. Hey, look, I'm
Word
gonna
check, y'all. Thank you.
this has been a great conversation. I mean,
Thank you.
I tell you, you're I feel bad about this saying this in a way, but you're exactly what I expected.
Oh,
Right?
cool. Oh,
From
well, that's
everything I
good.
read, I mean, you're getting, your art is really exhibiting your soul, and your
Yeah.
soul, it comes across when you just chat with somebody. You got a lot to say. I want to talk with you again sometime. Let's not make
I
this
would
our
love
last
that.
interview, okay?
I
Yeah,
would love that.
yeah. This is a great start to, our relationship, right?
I love that.
You get a chance to touch somebody else's life and learn something from it, and I really appreciate you sharing with me today.
Thank you for having me. I mean, this was maybe my easiest interview. Like, it was just a conversation, and I love that, right? Because that's what I am. I'm an activist, and I like to talk from the heart. So I
Mm.
appreciate you, asking me questions that were about me. Most people kind of just, so this is what you've done, but no, like there's a story behind everything that I've done. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate you taking time out to actually read my book. Most people don't.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's such an easy read, and it's a
yes,
quick read, and it's just jam packed with just instant value. I mean, it just yeah, and I'm so glad you enjoyed this too,
yes, I did.
and and I feel like yeah, that's what it was all about. It was just I wanted to learn more about you, and I'm glad
Thank
that
you.
you've been so forthright and so open and so articulate
Thank
as
you.
well. So let's do this again real soon.
Let's do it.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.